before.
Respect. Walk.
And this is after.
Respect. Walk.
It's obnoxious. Before we get into it, my band Crusade has a show in Nashville on
July
6th. That's a Thursday at the East Room at 8 p.m. Come see us. Would love to see you guys there. We're very excited to give you an excellent show. Last time we played there, we had a great time, and so did the audience. Come see me at our beautiful, sexy merch table. It is sexy as hell considering we are completely DIY and have very little money. Vulgar Display of Power is one of the most important records to metal ever. Period. In the 80s, the underground metal scene that was boiling up and starting to peak out into the mainstream was mainly headed by Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer, the big four, you know. Thrash had a pretty defined sound, and it had a very dedicated, arguably large cult following. In the early 90s, this little phenomena you might have heard of called grunge started to explode and really take over the mainstream and dominate a lot of those people who weren't quite into thrash but were interested in hard rock. That combined with Metallica going what many people consider mainstream basically solidified the end of the notoriety and some of the relevance of thrash. Sorry to trigger all of you metal elitists out there. I would say hands down its most relevant time was the 80s when it was really coming up as something new. Granted, I only found this on Wikipedia, but what I saw on Wikipedia said that when Pantera listened to that Black Album record, they felt like it was, maybe the word betrayal is a little bit too strong of a term, but it was too mainstream and clean and polished for their thrash fans, and Pantera wanted to give the fans something more thrash sounding. Now, I would never call Pantera a thrash band, but there definitely is strong thrash influence on what they do. That is especially noticeable in the sound and the mix. Having prefaced all that, I don't really like Dimebag's guitar tone.
Boo this man!
I, like many millennials, first encountered Pantera on Guitar Hero with Cowboys from Hell, and I was lit up. I was like, holy crap, this is incredible. Love this. What the hell is that tone? This riff is sick. This song is awesome. I need to learn all of this. And you know, that was like at least a decade and a half ago. That was a while back. And metal and production have come a long way, and so have my tastes. When you're first getting introduced to metal and you start with the classics, it does sound different and exciting, but when you compare it to other bands that have actually paid attention to soundcraft and trying to get things big and full, it definitely doesn't do the big and full thing very well. Trying to come from the perspective of someone who really likes Dimebag's tone, there's a lot of people that think he has the greatest guitar tone of all time. I would try and say the description of what they like about it is it's throaty as a result of it being pretty harshly scooped, and there is an edge to it that is almost like metal shredding or this real abrasiveness up in the treble area. And all things considered for the time, that was a groundbreaking, revolutionary tone. I definitely don't want to take that away from Dimebag. That was a very important tone towards making the tones that I love today. It was very important. But I mean, let's be honest. If you got a guy on a record trying to use that tone and play like Dimebag, you're like, he's just a Dimebag impersonator, and this feels very dated. There is a very low likelihood that would get any traction right now, period. I don't think it would even get that much traction from people who love Pantera, because they'd just go listen to Pantera. Everything that I could find on Vulgar Display of Power to me says that they took a lot of pride in making this record. Terry Date, who mixed, engineered, produced the record, thinks it was great and they were happy with the record, and even commented how the guys really did care about tone. It wasn't just a whatever, let's do it. Dimebag was so particular, he could hear minor pencil-thin EQ nuances in tone. So Dimebag really wanted that guitar tone. Now I'm going to do something sacrilegious and remix Walk, the biggest song from this record. All right, let's hop into this mix. First thing I want to do is just A-B the two mixes back to back. So this is the original mix. and this is my mix. So definitely more low end present on my mix for sure. The first thing I notice with their mix is they have this really ice picky thing at 5K that I'm positive is very intentional. It's very intentionally over exaggerated. I'm sure part of that has to do with them listening to it on their little crappy boom boxes, and they want that to be a substitute for impact as opposed to low end. There's still low end there. It's just kind of drowned out in the balance with these really ice picky high mids. Aside from just the gear that they would listen on for consumer electronics back in the day, I'm actually curious whether or not that was done in order to actually hit tape whenever it gets printed to a cassette or something. That ice picky 5K thing gets reduced because of the natural warmth and compression of tape. Like the way that sometimes you exaggerate an EQ to hit a compressor. I wonder if that's what it was. I mean, it might just not be that at all, so that's fair. But if we just listen to the original drums, and my drums, they have a reverb on that snare doing a lot of work to bring just a ton of mid-range in there in a way that I don't particularly find super pleasant. So I tried to back that off a little bit, but that was also a very 90s thing to do in general. Even on a lot of very popular records, you had this massive snare reverb that was just obnoxious and people thought were really cool. Not all reverbs are made equal. So, you know, some reverbs do the job great, other ones do the job obnoxiously and just eat up a ton of mid-range. So the first thing I did was boosted the butt out of this low end at 94 hertz, I guess about 95, whatever, close to the fundamental of that kick drum, and really beat the poop out of it. And used a transient shaper in order to get a little bit more of that impact exaggerated. So if we just A-B this really quick. That already de-emphasizes the reverb on that track so much just by emphasizing the dry parts a little bit more. Next on the EQ, I still wanted to make sure we had plenty of headroom, so I got rid of a ton of information below like 55 hertz. I gave a boost at about 213, which is close to the fundamental of the snare, in order to have that really hit the compressor I'm going to add on here later a little bit more violently to really shape the tone. I did a couple of dips here because this was just annoying stuff in the mid-range, mostly from that snare verb that I just want it gone. I just want it effing gone. And there was so much bite at 5.3 and 8.1. It was obnoxious. Obnoxious, I tell you. Let's take a quick listen here with an A-B. Kind of flattens it out a little bit more, which some people won't like. A lot of people love the personality of all of those really ice-picky, exaggerated, frankly awful sounding drums. Some people like awful. That's all there is to it. And I mean, again, for the time, that was a very exciting record, so I can't shit on it there. Next, I just added some saturation to it for a little extra heft, a little bit extra color. You're not even really gonna notice that much, I guarantee it, but there's something important going on there. Next, I did some mid-side EQ just to get it out of the way of some stuff, but particularly, I did a massive boost here at about 141, only on the sides, so that I could bring some of the toms back without affecting the tone of the snare or kick drum as much as possible. Hit this drum bus like an MFer. Really shape that snare and kick sound. So this is before, after, and then I clipped it because I'm a butthead. There is a real illusion of weight on that original kick drum that I wanted to maintain and exaggerate as much as possible, because that's some of the coolest bits of that kick drum. But if you actually listen closely in comparison to other drums, it's really more ice picky than it is weighty, even though it appears weighty when compared to other thrash records where there's like no low end on the kick. So again, this is a quick A/B before, after. Next, let's take a look at the bass, which I did some fun things with. Not a ton, but a little bit of embellishment. Let's just listen to this original bass tone really quick. That's a good bass tone. The one thing I would say, it's definitely more scooped in the low mids than it needs to be. Overall, that is a good bass tone, but we could get it to sit a little better and frankly connect with a little bit more harmony to our guitars to really get a nice binding on them, but we're gonna get to that in a second. So this is before and then after. It's got a more present low mid area, which frankly is where the bass wants to live for this genre of music, especially if you have your kick drum doing most of the sub information. So the first thing I did was bring back some actual mids at 474 pretty dramatically. I'm actually surprised I brought it back that much. That seems like a lot in a really boxy area, but it actually complements the guitars better. Having it in an area where the guitars aren't as present, but close to where the guitars are, actually helps make them feel like a big unit, just freaking annihilate. It gives you something closer to that metal wall of sound. To bring out the mid-range more, I also ran it through the proprietary signal chain on this bad boy, but I also did something really bizarre here, and I gave it a little bit more heft at about 38 hertz, substantially more. Now, if we listen to this bass off, let's just listen to it. You might think there's already a ton of low information in there. Why would I want to bring even more? Because it has a lot of low information at like 150-ish, which is a good place to have it. It's a great place to have it. Then at about like 80, it's just gone. It's just absolutely gone. And I think we want just a little more of that sub in there just to bring some actual heft so that you would feel it. You know what I mean? Especially going against the kick drum. So this is just that plugin. And you may be thinking to yourself, ugh, I like the first bass tone better. In a mix, you don't. In a mix, you do not. You don't think about, how does this instrument sound pristinely on its own? You think about, how does this instrument work with all of the other instruments in your mix, in your arrangement? I promise you, it's going to sit better this way. I promise you. And I still felt like it needed a little bit more low mid information, so I brought back some at 258. Last thing I did was cheat a little bit. I did soothe in the upper mids just to tame them a little bit, because they're a little bit crankly string sound that we really don't need, and the guitars got that covered. There's enough of it already that we just need to tame it. We don't need to kill it. We still want that to blend with that upper mid distortion with the guitars, but we don't want that to be annoying and obnoxious. So just this before, after. It feels like it darkens the bass a little bit, which frankly is fine. These guitars are so bright, we really don't need a whole lot more bright information happening. So then we have the guitars, which is arguably the most sacrilegious part, because Dimebag was very particular about the guitar tone that he wanted. All things considered, at least all of these tones were complementary to one another, even if I am not in love with the final product. So here's the guitar tone before. and after. One of the things you'll notice is this very amplifier bass sound or low end sound that comes through on the original that a lot of people like, and I get the appeal of it. But on the new one, I give it a little bit of tightening, but there still is a low end warmth. There's a nice balance. What I wanted to aim for was exaggerating the throatiness and trying to get rid of some of that ice picky, almost like pixely digital distortion sound. I just, in general, do not like a digital distortion sound, and Dimebag seemed to have, like, lived there. Not to mention, I don't love an overly scooped sound, to be honest with you, and I brought some of those mids back as well. First thing I did was go on a journey for mids, and it seemed like 924 was a happy place to bring back a lot of mid-range, substantially. There were a lot of pencil peaks to get rid of that I'm sure Terry Date wanted to get rid of, but decided to not get rid of because Dimebag was like, no, I want those. I absolutely want those. Weird choice, but okay. I mean, at the end of the day, when that album came out, everyone obsessed over that guitar tone. So, I mean, can't really say I blame him a ton. Again, ran it through the proprietary signal chain on their solid state setting. It kind of felt like I was getting too much focus in the mids and upper mids, so I wanted to balance that back out by bringing some low mids back, and I did that at about 250. Also the area where the bass is brought back, so that gives them a little bit of overlap. Sometimes that's a terrible idea and you'll get buildup. Other times they marry very well right there. It's all situational. So this is a before and after of just that plugin. That to me gives it a little bit more cut in the upper mids, tames out a lot of ice pickiness that was happening, and exaggerates the throatiness of what was there. Like, I would consider this original guitar tone somewhat throaty. There's something cool about it, and there is something cool about when he goes at the very end of that riff. You can hear a little, like, you can hear him muting the strings essentially, and that gives a little bit of like a low mid, which is cool. This feels more focused and, to me, a little bit more pissed, although I would say not quite as identifiable, if that makes any sense, though definitely still sounds like Dimebag. I did a mid-side EQ to get it out of the way of a few things. Did a few more pencil notches out of that EQ. Specifically what I did here on Soothe was really focus in at 4.7K. Dear Lord, close to 5K, just like the drums. Everything was hovering around there, just really exaggerated. So this is before. This is after. Like, I just don't need constantly. I just don't need that. I don't want that. It just gets in the way. Bringing that down actually allowed me to bring the guitars louder in the mix so that they actually are more forward, closer to what the original mix was, even though the tone is vastly different. I did some nifty things to this vocal I'm pretty happy with. This is before.
I'm easily bothered by persistence.
After.
One step from lashing out at you. You want in to get under my skin and call yourself a friend. I've got more friends like you.
Again, brought it forward a little bit more focused. I tried my best to use a noise suppressor to get that reverb and delay out of there, because I really hate that. It's such a dated, wasteful, takes me out of the moment sound. I much prefer a drier mix that's in your face when it comes to metal most times. There are exceptions. And for the time, that was the hip thing to do, so like I get it, but also, dear Lord, like, I want something that punches me in the face, and they could have had it punch in the face more with a drier mix, in my opinion. Then I used this saturation to really bring some kind of grossness to it. So this is before the saturation.
Bothered by persistence.
After.
One step from lashing out at you. You want in to get under my skin and call yourself a friend. I've got more.
Just brings a little attitude to it that I like, and it actually starts to bring personality to the mix that wasn't there initially. For the record, the original recording and mix of this vocal is a good recording and mix. I'm not saying it's bad by any means. It actually feels very natural, and I would say relatively well sculpted all around. But I think you can actually get it more in the unnatural territory to where it feels more aggressive and pissed off. And that's what I'm trying to do. If you noticed, like I did, bringing on this saturation, focused the mid-range up and really exaggerated it to the point where it feels like we might have lost a little bit of low end. So I brought that back.
Bothered by persistence. One step.
A little bit at 150. Then just did some EQ work to get it out of the way, but also the S's at about, what was it, 8K? Yeah, about 8K were super harsh, so I put a dynamic EQ on that really hard to really push those down. So if we take a listen here.
From lashing out at you, you want in to get under my skin and call yourself a friend. I've got more friends like you. What do I do? Is there no standard anymore? What it takes, who I am, where I've been, belong.
It definitely helps mellow that out. So his S's aren't just poking my ears constantly. Then I added a limiter to it just to give it that extra level of focus, hard compress it. The backing vocals is where I took the absolute most creative license. And you're gonna hate this isolated, but in the mix it sounds really cool. So this is just the backing vocals in the chorus before.
Respect. Walk.
And this is after.
Respect. Walk.
It's obnoxious. Some would say those sound like shit. Let's listen to that again.
Respect. Walk.
But if we listen to that in the mix, all of that shittiness that's happening in, again, the upper mids and maybe a little bit of the highs is just blending right in with how obnoxious the guitars and drums already are. So you don't even notice it. You don't notice it at all, but you still get that extra Again, I tried to use the noise suppressor to get rid of much of that freaking delay as possible. Nothing makes something sound less intense than buttloads of verb and delay. I added this absolutely gross saturation, old tape crunch, which just sounds horrific. This is before.
Respect. Walk.
And this is after.
Respect. Walk.
It's just horrifying. It is far from a pleasant sound, but we don't want this to be pleasant. Added a limiter to it, again, just to absolutely crush it. I did not care about making this sound natural. I wanted it to sound really pissed off. That was what I was going for. It doesn't need to sound pretty. It needs to make you go, oh, crap. And again, just a little bit of dynamic EQ at about 8K in order to tame some of those S's. Again, before and after. This is before.
Respect. Walk.
That just sounds like normal guys. This is what a warrior sounds like.
Respect. Walk.
It's deep fried to all hell. Feel this chorus with me, guys. That feels more like they're actually growling to me, and it feels more like closer to like they're in my face. Original versus my new mix.
What did you say? Are you talking to me? Are you talking to me?
I happen to like my mix substantially more, I gotta say. But, I mean, if you really love that original mix, that at least makes a little more sense to me considering the time. I have all of the respect in the world for what this sound did for the time. It was important. And also, it was on completely different gear for consumers. So this kind of mix would sound, I imagine, quite different in someone's car, or for that matter, over the radio. But I definitely prefer my mix. I'm curious to know which one you guys prefer. Let me know in the comments down below. Come see my band in Nashville, June 6th at the East Room, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Love you. Peace.